So sponsorship is something that comes up so much, and I think before we even get into this, it would be a good question to ask of why do you want to be sponsored in the first place? Is it just to get free stuff? Is it to have some clout with your friends? Is it so that you can pay for travel or something like that? And all of those reasons are actually valid, but I think just being honest with that, when my first race, my first year, I didn't go and look for sponsors so that I could race. I just worked at a bookstore so I could save money, and that was actually easier than trying to go out and get a sponsor to pay for that race season. But beyond that, once you realize the reason that you want to get sponsored, one of the first tips that I would say is really just understanding why you're valuable, why you as an individual are valuable. I think we can look in so many different directions, look on social media and see people having followers, and maybe it makes us think maybe we should get followers, and maybe that's what brands want. Or we look at races and see the winning racers getting sponsored, so maybe that's what we should do. And then we see other people doing videos, so we think that's what we should do. But I think the important thing to think about is bringing it back to yourself to say, what do I have to offer? For you, thinking about, do I have some unique ability? Do I live in a certain place that maybe people don't have access to? Can I show off a group of people or myself or my skills in a different way that people haven't thought about? What makes you unique? And then once you find that out, I think it's about searching out the people who match up with that. For me, riding for a company like Santa Cruz is just so cool. I love it, and I think that's a mutual relationship because they allow me everything that I want to do, they are extremely happy about. And that's not always been true in my career. I've ridden for companies where, I got on the race team or something like that, especially when I was first starting and I was trying my best to get results, but I would also try my best to get magazine articles, and I would write for magazine articles. I would get like 2-page spreads in magazine articles. And I remember one of the companies saying like, hey, we're gonna need more from you. And I was like, hey man, I just got like a 2-page spread in this big magazine article. And they were like, yeah, we don't care. And so that was like a really big wake-up call for me to say, it's not just like me trying and saying like, you should think this is valuable. It's about me aligning with the people that think what I'm doing is valuable from the start. So once you kind of figure that out, then you can reach out to different companies who align with that value. And for me, those are people who enjoy my personality, where I can bring my personality to the table, bring the things I'm interested in to the table, do things that maybe are a little bit different, doing analysis on World Cup times and things like that, and showing a different side of the biking industry. And that is kind of my unique thing. So after you kind of find what it means to find your value and search out the companies that are willing and fit you as a person, it's about being cool with rejection, because you're going to pitch a ton of people and you're gonna get no 99.9% of the time. I had this amazing experience it's amazing now, wasn't amazing at the time. End of 2016, I stopped riding for Pivot and I wanted to find a new team. I felt like that was what was gonna take me to the next level if I just had this or that, resource or whatever. And so I went out on a limb. No one really knew that I was gonna leave. And about midway through the year, I just started reaching out to people. I reached out to every single team on the World Cup circuit, and most of them said no. Maybe 3 or 4 of them were like, maybe. And so, after that, I was like, okay, I don't know if this is possible. So I said, I need to put together my own program. So I put together a deck, I put together a proposal, the races I wanted to do, I put together a budget of what it was gonna take to get me to all the races and Crankworx so I could hire a mechanic. I remember I went to Interbike, which is the trade show for the cycling industry, and I just was there for 8 to 10 hours every single day, pitching Shimano, SRAM, every single handlebar company, every single person I could think of. And it was fascinating, right? Like, I had heard so many people say like, yeah, if you ever want to work with us, like, we're super down or whatever. And I would come up to them and be like, yo, like, you remember, like, you want to work with me? Like, I just had my best season ever, got all these amazing results, all this amazing coverage. And they were like, yeah, like, I don't think so. And so it was this grind of like perseverance. And I ended up actually riding for my dream team at the time, which was Giant. And I got on that team. That was my #1 pick. But in that period from, July to November, I didn't know if I was going to have a job for the next year. And I just had to keep trying and keep going after those sponsors and keep believing in what I was doing, and had that backup plan where I could do my own thing. And so that was something that I've taken with me to everything that I do, where it's just like, it's actually more normal to get rejected than it is to get accepted. And kind of once you internalize that, the no's kind of don't really mean as much. So I want to put a microscope on 2 of my deals, which actually have been completely different. So with Giant, this was a race deal. This was when I was my most serious about racing. And the fascinating thing about that deal was that I'm pretty sure I didn't have race results on my resume, because going back to why I am valuable, the thing that I was bringing at that point, for one, was potential. And so the year before, I had won a bunch of split times. I had some bad luck. And so I said, you know what? Don't look at this finished process, this outcome. Look at the process that I was taking here. Look at the split time that I got at Fort William. Look at the good result that I did have, where I got 13th when I didn't get a flat or didn't have some bad luck happen. And think about this as potential, that if I have the right resources, I can really unlock. For Giant, thinking about the way that our kind of values align, Giant at the time really didn't have a lot of marketing, they weren't super cool. So I said that this is something that I can bring, right? And I think that they would agree with me on that one, where it was about me bringing some personality to their brand, getting out there in the pits, talking with fans, doing interviews and things like that, things that I love to do, and things that they had a deficiency in. So I think that is something that is really important to highlight, is that when you do go and pitch a company, it's not just saying, dear sir or madam, I like to race bikes and this is what I do and please hire me. It's about digging into, for me to say like, hey, you guys have resources. I believe with those resources, I can get to the next level. Here is a deficiency that you guys have that I believe that I can fill. And then beyond that, I really vibe with you, right? Like, I had made that relationship with Giant and the team manager and everyone on the team. One of my best friends, Marcelo, rode for the team. So that relationship as well allowed me to some credibility. And I didn't make that relationship just because maybe one day I thought I might ride for Giant. It was genuine. And so with those 3 things, I was able to get that kind of dream team. And that would have been completely different, right? The other person that got on the team that year, the pitch that they made was 100% different. And so I think that it's important not to think that there is a silver bullet in terms of what you have to say to get a sponsor. It's individually based. And if you're gonna, compete on results, know that, Eliot Bruni is also sending in his resume, who just won the World Cup overall. So that might not be the best avenue to take. And I want to also highlight Santa Cruz, because that one was really kind of completely different, where I had always wanted to ride for Santa Cruz. I'd had this amazing relationship, like Greg Menard is one of my best friends, and same with Lucas Shaw, who was on the team at the time, but they only had Syndicate, which I wasn't good enough to get on. And so it never really worked out. I got on Giant and we had kind of talked about it. And so after I got done racing, the stars aligned, where I had this incredible relationship, right? I would go over to the Christmas party and the Roscops house for dinner. even when I wasn't on the team. And so one of the things that allowed to happen was for this relationship to develop and this trust to develop, because I knew that they liked me just for me. And they knew that I liked them just for them. And so when I started writing for them, I knew that they were serious when they said, yeah, you can kind of do whatever you want. And we trust that we're not gonna put a bunch of stuff in your contract where you have to be here and you have to do this photo shoot and you have to go to this race, because there was trust enough for me to say, hey, if you give me freedom, maybe I'll end up on Red Bull TV, maybe I'll end up on the cover of a magazine, maybe I'll end up, starting a foundation and doing all of these things that really align with what you're trying to achieve as a brand. And so that, I think, worked. But it only worked because we had that relationship in the beginning. So I think the big thing to take away is don't just do things so that you can get something out of it, but also know where you want to go, because it will make things so much easier, and you'll be so much happier when you do find someone that you really align with, not just the first person that will pick you up. So one thing that doesn't get talked about a lot is kind of the money situation. How much should you ask for? What does it mean to be a pro rider? To get paid to ride, for it to be your job. And I actually always approach this the other way, where to say, what are kind of my living expenses? Especially when I'm first getting into it, to say like, hey man, I am down to sleep on my friend's couch. I'm gonna go all in on this. I really only need, $15,000 or $20,000. I kind of think of the Van Zacks, the Kiwis doing this. They would work in the wintertime, and then go and travel all summer and get a van together, live van life. And they would go to all the World Cups. And people think you need this amazingly, high salary or a ton of money to do that, but they all pitched in together and did it for like nothing. And so if you think about, adding those constraints and saying, okay, I want to make $15,000 or $20,000 so that I can cover my living expenses for the year and really give this professional biking thing a go. And then again, thinking about that value and saying, who does that align with? And a lot of people think just about biking companies, but there is a lot of different companies that are in the outdoor space. One of the companies that I started partnering with was Hydro Flask. And so when you're thinking about the companies to go to, it's really breaking it down, right? Like if I need $20,000, if I can get 10 companies to pay me $2,000, that's not too bad, right? I can get some handlebars, I can get some tires, I can get a bike. And then you say, well, how in the world do I get somebody to not only give me $2,000, but also give me some free parts? So one of the tools that I used, back in the day, I loved writing, and I ended up I would usually get 1 or 2 articles in Decline magazine every year. So I looked up the advertising rates for Decline magazine, and they were like $10,000. And so I then went to brands and said, hey, I'm getting this magazine article that's worth $10,000 of advertising for you, and I'm doing it for free. So why don't you pay me a little bit of money based on that advertising value that I'm bringing to you? And not everyone can write for Decline, but let's say you do YouTube videos with your friend. They're getting 5, 10, 20,000 views, and then you can go to them and say, hey, here's 10,000 views. If I can get this many views, also highlight your product, how much is that worth to you? And how can we shift it to be really valuable, right? And knowing your audience to say, hey, most of these people are on the East Coast in this town. I realize that it's not a town that you have a big presence in, so I think this would be really valuable to you. So then after kind of going through all of these things, that $20,000 doesn't really sound like too much. If I can just pitch $2,000 for each company, display the value that I'm providing, display the advertising, know what they value, and be able to execute on that, it's not too bad. And A lot of the times you can just find an email on a LinkedIn or even messaging somebody on Instagram if you can find the marketing manager. It shows initiative, and also you'll stand out from the pile of resumes that they get that say, "Dear Sir or Madam."